I'm
Okay.
recording now, and
Great.
then we can jump in whenever.
All right.
So, actually,
What's
what I
your
would
name?
love to
Uh-huh.
do right now is
Yeah.
play the first song of Troop Beverly Hills, the intro song to the whole movie, because I really do think that it's the best. I love that intro,
Okay.
but
Well, what do you love about the intro? Or you want to play it first? Why don't we play it first?
now I know. Can I
Can we
find
pull it
it?
up real quick?
We have to sing the song. We used to love it, now we don't know if we like it. Is it
Oh.
for real? Um, so hello everyone. This is
Hi,
Annie and
Lisa. And we are here to record a part 2 of Is It For Real, Troop Beverly Hills. So Annie, why did we want to do this today?
so Lisa, both you and I are people that we've both described that this movie was very foundational in our childhood and was also very important to us in our childhood.
True.
And I think we had seen it so many times that we just had certain things like memorized in our head. And we also just kind of remembered all these really great pieces about it. And I, and we just wanted to bring that flair to the podcast, and we wanted to bring that perspective.
Yeah, I have to say when I was listening to, the very talented, very, smart Philip and Katie and Bridget on this movie, what I did feel was missing is that the only one of the three that had seen the movie as a kid was Phil, and it was only once. And so it did seem like they were missing that nostalgic connection to the movie that I know that you and I have
Yeah.
very deeply.
Yeah.
And so it's likely valuable to try to talk a little bit about the movie from that perspective, just like you were saying, people who
Yeah.
watched it and felt so strongly about it. And I also
Yeah.
have to say, like, growing up, I mean, I know the words to very few movies. My brain does not work like that. But this is like one of possibly 2 or 3 movies that I know nearly every word to.
Yeah. Totally. Definitely. I know this movie was like, yeah, it's like we watched it constantly. And yeah, so I think that we definitely agreed with some of the parts that you guys felt, or that the three podcasters felt didn't hold up. And we also wanted to jump in to some of the spots that, yeah, at least as you said, we felt were kind of like glossed over, and some of our favorite little nuggets of the movie.
Exactly. And, I think we can maybe confront right away the fact that I think both you and I, Annie, I'll speak for myself. I know that the premise of these poor, rich, ragtag kids who have everything they need, yet we're supposed to feel bad for them because they're like outcast and made fun of. It's an absurd premise.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, many movies from our childhood have incredibly absurd premises. So and if you can kind of put that aside and be like, okay, as Phil said, he said, it's really, it doesn't make sense to combine the slobs and the snobs. So, okay, agreed. But let's put that aside
Mm-hmm.
and kind of talk about some of the things that were pretty fun about this movie. And I think you mentioned something when we were talking before about just like kind of the fantasy aspect of it as like being a kid watching the movie.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you felt this way too, where it's kind of you're watching. It's not necessarily like we had, I think I'd heard the words Beverly Hills, and it was also a very like hot topic of that time. Like Beverly Hills Cop, Beverly Hills Ninja, like Beverly Hills 90210, like it was the place of the times. But I felt like it wasn't like, oh, I need to be there. It was more so like, it's just a really fun world to watch. And like, it's fun just to it's like playing dress up for an hour and a half. And it's just like, it's just
That's
very aesthetically pleasing. So
that's
one thing,
totally it. It's like
yeah,
playing dress up for an hour and a half.
yeah, it's like you're on it's like a dollhouse that's a movie. And it was just really fun. And so I think yeah, and it was like kind of like a fun fantasy to go to,
Mhm.
just like cool different things to watch. And yeah, so the intro song I feel like got me in that mood because it was such like especially as a kid, where a lot of the movies that you watch are either Disney or something like that. Like this felt like a mix between adult and kid. And that's
Mhm.
something that I think you mentioned earlier, probably talk later, but like like, and I think as a kid watching a movie that's both for adults and kids, like is really fun. And that
I
song kind of like gets you all warmed up for it.
I agree. And then I feel like pretty soon, like when you start the movie, and for me, this is a theme throughout, which I think adds to the fun. I think this movie has a great set of montages. So like right off the bat, if we don't mind kind of just like talking a little bit about some of the things that we love, um, we get this little montage where the lady who is the head of the Wilderness Girls is kind of reading Phyllis Neffler's like profile or her application, and then you're going between what she's reading and then like clips of her shopping and doing all these absurd Beverly Hills things. And like just kind of the pace of it and the fantasy of it. And I don't know about you, but when she has the beaded dress and then says to the saleswoman it's missing a bead and like taps it with her middle finger, like there was just something that I always just loved about that scene. Like I'd be looking for the
Yeah.
missing bead. I'd be like, oh yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. And the way that they compare the two worlds. So it's like, just like what you're saying in that scene, it's like there's a piece of paper that has all these very traditional wilderness things. And I think one of the lines is like, like she loves nature. And then it's a picture, then it's like a scene of her kissing like a Cartier like frog. It's
right,
just like the way, and I think that the movie does a really good job of setting up like it's like, hey, we're not pretending anything. We know this is a caricature of Beverly Hills and rich life. And it's like, we're going to lay it out for you at the very beginning. Like, just what you're
yeah,
saying, like, scene by scene, we're going to say, this is kind of ridiculous. And I think you're going to have fun with it.
totally.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about their house when you think
Their
about the
house.
Neffler's house?
I mean, don't you think as a kid, you're like, that house has everything I'd ever want?
I think, I mean, I just, like, I looked at it, especially, I just rewatched it,
Yeah.
for this very reason. I just felt like it looked like an elaborate, like, gingerbread house. Or like it was a
Yeah.
cupcake. Like
Yeah.
like it's a giant cupcake of a house.
Oh, totally. And it's like as a kid, I feel like I was very focused on if houses had pools or not. Like growing up in California, if you had a
Okay.
pool, that
Uh-huh.
was like, oh my God, that was like the coolest thing ever. And you could just like, that was kind of me, like the top of the top. And we didn't have a pool, but like, oh, certain friends had pools. And I feel like their house had, and also Katie will know this, kind of makes fun of me that I didn't grow up in a house with stairs.
Okay.
So I did. So I think this house had a pool, B
Oh, okay.
stairs, and
Oh.
it just seemed like yeah, like over the top luxury,
I love
but
it. All
just
you need is stairs and a pool and you need for
yeah,
fantasy as a
totally.
kid.
That's it. Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
And so what do you think about like our first family that we meet? We have Phyllis
Mm-hmm.
and the Muffler Man, which I know you may want to comment on, and Jenny Lewis. Like that's just an added bonus that later on we get to learn that it's Jenny Lewis in the movie because
So
she's
honestly,
the best.
there are so many child stars in this movie, and I
Yeah.
remember appreciating that as like maybe an early teen or a teenager. I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
nice.
like
Okay.
there was the girl who was from Punky Brewster, and then there
Yeah.
was a girl that was in the early years of Saved by the Bell, and the one that was in, I think she was in Small Wonder, maybe, or so like there were several, and then the woman who ended up being in ER, like there were lots of kids who ended up being, or who had either been in other movies or ended up being in other movies, and obviously Jenny Lewis is awesome, so that
Yeah.
was great. So yeah, like I loved the family, honestly. Like, oh, so Bridget did talk a lot about Craig T. Nelson and how much she loved him. I loved him in this movie as well. I also loved him as Coach, but because I saw this movie so much, Craig T. Nelson as Fred Neffler, like, is very much his own entity, and I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to clarify a point that I think Katie may have been slightly confused by, I always understood that Fred Neffler was the owner of Neffler's Mufflers, would make sense, right? Because it's named after him. And that he didn't make millions of dollars by dressing up as a muffler to be a mascot in commercials, but likely owned an incredibly successful chain of muffler repair shops throughout the greater LA area. Just a point of clarity.
Yeah. I think that is a great assumption and point of view. And yes, I think like his name, it sounded like he did own it. But it also sounds like he went to college. And so maybe he just does, I mean, not went to college, he went to law school.
Yeah.
And so I think he's a lawyer that owns a muffler shop.
So I don't know if he's a BART attorney. I would assume that he graduated law school.
Interesting.
Maybe he passed his bar, but then he realized the muffler business was something either he was more interested in or would be more successful at, or maybe didn't have to work as hard at, because lawyers do work very hard.
That is true. That is very true. Yeah.
That's what I always thought, that he kind of left the law to the side despite all of the hard work that Phyllis did clipping those coupons.
I know, clipping those coupons. Oh, so good.
So what did you think about her polka dotted dress when you see her in that?
Oh, love it. Love it. I mean, I think it is hard. Okay, I think we should address something again early on, is that we are always going to have nostalgia colored glasses for this entire discussion. And I think Phil, Bridget, and Katie are very good experts at taking off those glasses. And I will just admit that I'm not as good as taking off those glasses. And so when you ask me about that polka dot dress, I just have like flashbacks to just like, oh, I love it. Like remembering, like, I just think her outfits are so fun. I think they're all over the top enough that like you just, yeah, it's just kind of something like it's a little bit silly, but then it's also just like really fun and looks cool. Right. So yeah. And actually, if you try to watch the trailer of the movie, it's just that scene, like where Fred Neffler comes in and is, wants to get his stuff from the bedroom, and she's wearing the polka dot dress. So I feel like, when I wasn't able, like in college or something, where I was like, oh, I kind of want to watch Troop Beverly Hills, but like couldn't actually watch it, and I would watch the trailer. I've seen that scene like a million times.
Wow. Okay. I did not watch the trailer. I was just in it to win it.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing, I'm doing a lot of retorting right away, but I do have to make a very serious point about the gymnastics comments.
Yes.
By the podcasters.
Yes.
I was a childhood gymnast, as Katie knows, and as you, Annie, know. And I do have to say, despite what our, very observant podcasters felt about seeing Hannah Neffler on a regulation height balance beam in a dance studio, she was over a 2-inch mat, which is a totally reasonable mat. Every kid gymnast has that mat. And maybe I would have been a little concerned if she was doing, cartwheels or back walkovers or something, even like full turns on the beam. She was barely walking across the beam. I had absolutely no concerns about her safety, no concerns about her parents being concerned about her safety. I think it was a completely reasonable scene, and I don't necessarily think she was an entirely good gymnast, but they were rich, they had money, and hey, I would have loved to have had a regulation height balance beam in my house.
Oh my God, yes. I didn't even do gymnastics, and that would be amazing. And, Lisa, she was good enough to get across that log. And that's all that mattered. And
get
her
mom
across
she did get her foot stuck.
Yeah, that actually is true.
I was like,
so maybe she wasn't good enough.
But I do have to say, when like Phyllis was, okay, we're jumping to the end, but that's okay. We're talking about what we love in this movie. Yeah. When Phyllis was like, I'm going to do it, I'm like, lady, you are in high heel boots. Yeah. You like have no idea what you're doing. Your kid at least has experience on the balance beam. Like, it makes so much more sense for your kid to do it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I know, that's so true. Uh, I guess, yeah. She just has to like, and she says it like, make the point that it's like, and so Lisa, this is something that you've mentioned before, that one of the reasons why you really love this movie, is that like we both watched it as young girls, and especially during that time, there were so few movies where like young girls were the star of the movie, and you make a
Right.
great point in saying that like actually the kids are you like no more than the adults a lot of times in this movie.
Right.
And I feel like when Phyllis like has to walk across, she kind of like is this like she acknowledges that like her daughter is the adult in the family, and that like these troops of kids are, you know, like the ones that are kind of in a way more adult than she is, and she's like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
just have to do it. But then like, you know, her daughter like kind of saves her, and then she saves her. It like kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah.
But I
That
thought that was such a great point. And it
that is,
is,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that is one of my I think one of the reasons why I loved the movie so much as a kid. Both like the kids really being more of adults than the adults.
Yeah.
And like there were several points I started taking notes of when like the kids were taking care of Phyllis. But besides that, I also feel like there was a theme not just with Phyllis, but of like the adults really like listening to the kids and deferring to the kids and asking for the kids' input. Like Tessa was like giving her dad tips about his movies, and I forget her name, but you know, the sexy novel lady would
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
ask her daughter what she should do.
Yeah.
Like they were really invested in what their kids had to say, and I felt like I kind of like saw that as empowering as a kid. Like, oh, these like 11 and 12-year-old girls actually like are listened to in their family and they have
Totally. Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, I know that's such a great point. I really like
Yeah.
that point. I think it is a piece that, you know, I still enjoy today.
Yeah. How about like when we meet the all of the girls? Like I feel like this is another great little montage, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, they're getting ready for the first meeting and then you kind of meet each girl.
Mm-hmm.
Like is there anything of note kind of during that whole scene that pulls you in?
I mean, yeah, I love that you kind of like get a flavor of each of the different personalities. And then that they're all kind of like showing up, and there's like, you know, these kind of crazy candles on the table, and like it is, yeah, again, it's just kind of like the absurdity is so fun in the way that it all comes together. And like they're all arriving in these kind of like crazy fancy cars, and just the lines. I think like a lot of the girls are really witty. And I think
Absolutely.
that they're again just kind of like fun to watch on their own.
And I mean, the moment where like I think it was Bridget makes a good point. Like, you know, of course, the one African American family in the movie is the one that's stopped by a cop. Like, not entirely absurd because it's more likely, you know, than not to be that one family, you know, in reality. But then like the girl busting in and having her excuse me officer moment. I mean
Yeah.
that I cannot even think about that scene without just like getting a huge smile on my face. Like she just takes charge and it is badass and
Yeah, totally.
it just tickles me. I love
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it. So
And yeah.
what do you think about Velda? So the podcasters had a lot to say about Velda and kind of her persona and how she was introduced to us as this like really absurd drill sergeant
Hmm.
wilderness girl. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think like in retrospect, looking back, like she is so over the top and very violent, and that is a lot. But I think that it, again, maybe the fact that it is so over the top kind of like helps it in a way, like because it is so absurd. Like if she was more like subtly violent or subtly abusive to the character Annie or to some of the other people, then I feel like it's like, ooh, this isn't funny. Like this isn't, um, but like she is kind of, and also I don't know, like it's unclear why she hates her so, like why Velda hates Phyllis so much. Um, but I think all these things, like these kind of like thoughts and discussions about Velda, like I think as a character, like I'm totally fine with her. And I think it's still, it's not someone I'd want to hang out with, or it's not like I think she plays a good villain and she plays a different villain.
That's
Like she's not,
exactly what I was gonna say.
yeah, she's not Russian. Like I feel like the way that they made villains in the 80s and 90s was they just made them Russian. Like I'm glad
Right.
she doesn't have a Russian accent or anything.
Right.
Like
Although her name is Zelda, so you wonder where
that
that
is true, maybe. But I don't know. I think she as a villain, like she still kind of works for me.
well, I think she's a perfect villain, in that, like, you do not question where you stand on Velda. Like, she's awful. She sucks. You hate her.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah.
And, like,
Yeah. No one has like is being Velda for Halloween.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Although that would really be great. Maybe I should.
That could be this year's.
I would love that. Yeah, so I mean, and I just think kind of similar to what you said, like, movies in the late 80s, like, that's kind of, like, villains were over the top absurd and super violent as well. So, yeah, like, it's a lot, especially if you're thinking about it through the lens of maybe, like, an 8-year-old kid watching it, where she has, like, a crossbow, like,
Yeah.
hitting the face of her enemy, which is this, like, rich lady. But yeah, I mean, I think she works as a villain.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, totally.
Phil did make the comment that he's like, she's a serial killer. Like, she's got a villain.
She is, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Probably.
So it was funny. I'm just trying to look through some of my notes. Her little, we're not here to teach little toddlers to make cupcakes.
Yeah.
And that one line made 2 people leave right away. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
you wouldn't have invested all that time to, like, buy the outfit,
I
like, go to
know.
the orientation and be like, oh, we're not teaching them to make cupcakes. I'm out.
Yeah, they're like, I'm out of here. Totally.
So,
So another thing, kind of talked about it earlier, but like the songs of the movie, I think really are still catchy and fun to sing. And Cookie Time being one of them. And then also their marching chant, which I love as well. And is also probably like one of my top things, like favorite things to sing if I'm on a hike. Like
so
that definitely gets stuck in my head. And I hope that the person I'm hiking with also knows what I'm talking about so they can sing along with me.
I didn't do a lot of hiking as a kid, so I didn't have that experience of being able to, like, bring it to my real life of hiking as a kid. But that scene during the jamboree where they just, like, muster it up and march and sing, I mean, is truly one of the crowning moments of this movie.
So good.
I mean, you just
So
want to
good.
be there. You want to be
Yeah.
dancing. You want to be a part of the fun. You want to be singing. I loved it.
Yeah.
Totally.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, cause you had talked about loving the music, and I think, like, maybe, like, cause there was, our podcasters voiced some concern about Kumbaya, which I think we both acknowledge was,
Yes.
Though didn't necessarily feel inappropriate in the late 80s or early or 90s when we were watching it, like, probably, like, definitely doesn't hold up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But in terms of kind of, like, yeah, the music and the chants around the troop and kind of how that brought them together, I mean, it was pretty great part of making the story kind of warm the heart of an 11-year-old child.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like, I don't know why, but there were a couple of just little, like, gems that for me just, like, draw me in. And I think some of it is around the pace of certain scenes. So for whatever reason, the scene where Phyllis hears the realtor's car, Fred's girlfriend's car stop, and she knows that she's there. And so you get this, like, weird sax in the background or something when, like, this lady comes out, which is totally absurd.
Yeah.
But Phyllis,
yeah,
like,
that 80s sax.
Yeah, like, here's this, like, curvy lady coming out with her silicone boobies. But, like, when they show Phyllis, like, hearing what's going on, and taking her binoculars and running to the window in slow motion in her like nightgown.
Yeah.
Something about like this slow motion run in this like silky gown. I don't know, it like does it for me. I love it. I just like love the pace of it. I love the like goofy music to it. I think it's hilarious.
Nice. Yeah, totally.
That is one of the precious moments. Another super precious moment. Don't know why I love it. But when she is in the main house, she's watching Jane Fonda. She is trying to open the mayo with the knife. And then it's just the way that they paired up the music and the sound of the aerobic video with the beat of her hitting the
Yes.
mayo jar and then
Yes.
looking over and seeing Fred slowly doing Tai Chi and it's like moving to the same beat as Jane Fonda. I just think like that's so special. I don't know why. It does it for me.
Totally. And did you know it was nominated for cinematography, the Oscar that year?
No way. Are you
No,
kidding
it
me?
wasn't, but it totally should have been. It totally should have been
That is
because you're
the most
totally
unbelievable.
right. You're totally right in the sense that it's like there's these scenes that it's like you described. We've never talked about that moment before. You just described it. I listened to it and I was like 100%.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was like,
I agree with you 100%. That movie conveyed that exact same feeling for me too.
So it's so funny.
That's
Like when
good
I
film.
was just watching it, like this last week, I was like, those were the things that I was keying in on. I was like, what was it
Totally.
that brought me like so much joy as a kid? I'm like,
Yeah.
this lady hitting the mayo jar. Don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, are
Um,
there anything like any of those that occur to you? I know. I
oh
don't
my
know if you were
God,
watching
so
it.
many. But one that I love also is I love movies, kids movies that are two layers. So like for the adults and for the kids.
Yeah.
And I feel like the scene with the Evian bottles all over her room, I
Yep.
feel like that's the quintessential like if you're 5 years old, and that's like, when I first watched that movie, I was 5 years old. It's like I didn't understand that at all. It's like, okay, there's this boring scene where she's like sad in bed.
Mopey.
And
Yeah.
then like when you're older, you're like, oh my God, that's so clever. Like that's so funny the way that they just like use these like because Evian is like the quintessential, just like luxury, like over the top luxury water. And the two
Mm-hmm.
words luxury and water should not be in the same sentence. Like it's
Right.
ridiculous. And I love that they use Evian bottles like in replace of alcohol. And it's just
Right.
such a clever scene. And I think I really appreciate like I feel like a movie like Shrek really kind of like brought that to light where you had this like for the adults and for the kids.
Yeah.
But I feel like Troop Beverly Hills, had it in it all along.
I totally agree. I feel like there was just a lot of good comedy and wit. I'm trying to think if there's any other like moments like that that jump out. It might take me a little bit, but there was just so many things that you're like, really? Like
Yeah.
this woman? Uh, so how about just like the cookie sales, like the cookie time or maybe the fashion show? What do you think about that now that you're watching that as an adult?
It's it is yeah, it's fun to rewatch and kind of like um I mean I just love it. It's that same feeling of just like it's warm and fuzzy. I love that there's this like huge, crazy, over the top party
Mm-hmm.
for Girl Scout cookies. And
Right.
and I feel like I don't know. What do you think about it?
Well, like as a kid, I was always like, "Oh my god, this is the smartest way to sell cookies. Like, why don't Girl Scouts do this?" You know, like why don't they all? And then I was like, did not realizing like, oh, you would have to have like an insane amount of money to put on like a fashion show hosted by Robin Leach. But I
Yeah,
also like, I
totally.
kind of loved the idea of like how they framed Shelley Long as like such a socialite that like
Yeah.
all of these famous people would be looking to her for fashion trends. You
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
wife of a muffler business. You know, like the muffler owner, like
Yeah, totally.
so, and then of course, just like the fashion at the show was really great. And I mean, Cookie Time was like such a fun. I just wanted to be up there dancing with the girls.
Oh yeah.
And
It's
I
so
also,
good.
I loved that Shelley Long was on stage with them.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what I remember remarking when I was younger is that I loved that she wasn't the lead singer.
Totally.
Like I loved that it was like she was like one of the three background like dancer singers and other people were leading. And again, that's kind of like what we talked about before. Like I think the movie does a really good job of showcasing like the kids.
Absolutely.
And yeah, Shelley Long's the main character, but she's not the front of everything.
Yeah, and just like as a girl watching this movie, and I don't remember if I said this or not, but I did feel like really empowered and inspired. Of course, again, like these were rich girls who had access to things that I didn't have access to, but I don't
Yeah.
remember like necessarily wanting to, be in this like rich place where I had everything at my disposal, but I just remember like the excitement about what they did together and like kind of, the empowering message of like, oh, when we're together, we can do anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then them having that experience with this like ridiculous Beverly Hills.
Yeah. For sure.
Um,
And then I think it kind of all comes like what you're talking about comes together at the Jamboree
the Jamboree, which is a
because
grueling test.
yeah, I know. And it's like as someone who has hiked in outside of Los Angeles, they do get it right. Like it does look exactly like that. I wonder where they filmed it. They must have filmed it somewhere outside of LA. But it does capture the essence of hiking in Southern California.
I do have to say one thing as an adult, like just watching it this past week, even though I have seen it many times as an adult also, is the fact that they were about to start. Like everybody is lined up, everybody's ready to go. And then like they have this, fashionably late entrance. I'm like, did you guys not get the invitation for what time it starts? Like, why is it
Yeah.
everyone else is there on time and you guys are
Yeah.
there when they're about to shoot off the gun?
Yeah. And the amount of limos in this movie is absurd. It's like every, and again, I feel like I keep bringing up the 80s, 90s, but like I remember watching Pretty Woman like as a kid, and it's just like LA in the early 90s did love a good limo. Like they had to have a good limo. Whereas I feel like if you did it today, I wonder what kind of cars they would have. They would definitely not have a limo. Or I
They
don't
would
think
have
they would
like a
have a limo.
stretch Hummer or something, or they would
Yeah,
have no, they'd
maybe.
have a Tesla.
They'd
They'd
all
have
have like
four
test.
Teslas. Yeah,
Yeah. But I do love that they show up to this mountain jamboree with a pile of limos. But I mean, it also like is a great throwback to the early scene where they get like, a moving company to set up their entire
camp.
campaign area. So it actually, like, if anything, it's very true to the movie. It's true to
Yeah,
self.
I agree. And then like the actual jamboree, it's a little goofy. It's not like the rules aren't very clear, but that's not really the point, right? The point is like, can these rich girls do it in nature? Like
Yeah.
can they make it happen in nature? And of course, like Velda puts in the wrenches of not letting Annie go with them, and then she puts in a further wrench of her deciding to be the troop leader when she pretends that the Red Feathers troop leader is sick. Um, but like one of the things that I really loved and especially love like looking back but thinking about it like as a movie for kids was the moment where they had this like real moral quandary of like, do we take this injured Velda who's been so awful to us the whole time, and then Phyllis does pose it to the girls and they say
Yeah.
let's leave her, and Phyllis was like no, like, so I
Yeah.
did love that he gave them the option, but then when they made the wrong
She was
option.
like, no, wait, we don't really we need to help out our fellow wilderness girl.
Right. But like honestly, like I thought that was such a good, like, I don't know about you, but I went to Sunday school as a kid and I remember like learning about some Bible stories and like learning about kind of the morals of like the Jewish religion and kind of working through ethical and moral dilemmas. Like I remember that specifically, but this was like a way more interesting moral and ethical dilemma than like whatever we were posed when I was like, I don't know, 8 or 10 at Sunday school. So I don't know, I just really liked it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I know. In the end, again, I'm gonna go back to my theme of music, where they changed the lyrics on you at the very end to fit the end of the movie, and everyone in the crowd is like dancing and singing. And they take that picture that you like think I thought it was like a real wilderness girl picture. Because you know at the beginning they have like the troop champion of like 1989 and
Yeah.
then this one is like the troop champion of 1990. I think
Uh-huh.
I like as a kid remember like trying to find it like in real life and
Wait, so
like
did you think that the Wilderness Girls were
not
real?
really, but it's just like
Okay.
I don't know. Again, like we were talking about scenes that just like I don't know, maybe it's like the music and like I feel like they use slightly different film for that last scene. I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
like I love that last scene. It's so good.
that's good. And like, she and Phyllis and Fred get back together, but I don't know, like I wasn't necessarily really wrapped up in that story as much as just like the girls'
Yeah.
experience and everything. So,
Yeah, exactly.
so obviously, I mean, I can only imagine anyone who's listening to this, whether it's no one or Katie, Phil, Bridget, or whoever, like knows probably how we feel about whether or not this is
Yeah.
for real. But I mean, it's so for freaking real, right?
100%. 100%. And I think we were just talking about like we don't have kids of our own, but our nephews that like I think that they would enjoy it. And if not, we're gonna try and we're gonna
Right.
watch it and we're gonna see.
We're gonna be dancing to Cookie
Yeah.
Time in the
Yeah,
living.
exactly.
Yeah. And like maybe we'll have to be like, hey, this was from a long time ago when white people didn't realize that they're not supposed to be wearing headdresses of Native Americans
Totally.
because they don't understand the significance. Like,
Yes.
yes, absolutely. Or like, some of the dictator references. Like, yes, looking back, that does seem pretty over the top and absurd and inappropriate. But
Yeah.
I would say the vast majority of kind of like the fun and like the songs and the togetherness and the wilderness just
Hmm.
like overtakes some of the like, okay, this movie was made 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Do we have any final notes that we want to leave
Oh,
this
one more thing.
yeah,
So, the lead actress,
very important.
Shelley Long.
Yep.
What do you think, Lisa? Do you think she was the right person for the role?
Absolutely. Unequivocally. What about you, Annie?
I have to agree with you. I think that we were talking about this earlier, but I think that this character requires someone who can be satirically funny, over
Mm-hmm.
the top, but then also, like not so much of a character of their own person as an actor that like it overtakes the role. And I have to admit that like this was my first Shelley Long role that I saw her in. So like I didn't have any other there was no Cheers Shelley Long in the back of my brain. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think I saw this and then later saw um the Brady Bunch movie.
Mm.
Which do you know who that was directed by? It
Ben
was directed
Stiller?
by Velda.
Oh, how cool.
So this
Oh my god.
Troop Beverly Hills was Velda's last like acting role and she
Yeah, that's what Katie
became
said.
director and she directed
So
the
random.
the Brady Bunch movies and some other I think like Can't Hardly Wait, but
Oh, I
at
love
least
that
like the Brady
movie.
Bunch movies and which makes me like her a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I thought that
She's probably not a legit villain in real
yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah. Um, but I thought Shelley Long was just perfect for the role. Like she convinced me just enough that she could be this Beverly Hills housewife, but I
life.
thought she was real enough. Like she seemed like I don't know, like a genuine person that it wasn't all about shopping to her or money and shopping. Like
Right.
she walked that line that I don't know if other big stars at the time like I would have felt as convinced.
I agree. I think she did a great job of being a totally out of touch Beverly Hills mom, but still being like real and human and then having those emotional moments. So loved it.
Yeah.
Were there any to end? Did you have a favorite outfit of Shelley
Such
Long's in the movie?
such a good question. Well, here, Lisa, why don't we start with yours?
Okay. So my favorite outfit is actually, okay. So I kind of have two. I have the favorite
Okay.
outfit of like, oh, that I think is really fashionable and I would wear some version of that. And it was a very short scene where she was like clipping an orange tree and she had these
Yes.
big, voluminous, like zebra printed flowy pants that were either palazzo pants or they were wrap pants. And then she had like a black shirt on that was kind of like lacy. So it was kind of like the mixed pattern. I loved it. Thought it was
Yes.
amazing. I would totally wear that this weekend.
Yes.
Um, and then I think it's hard to, just in terms of like absurd, over the top, like late 80s, early 90s fashion is the pastel dress at the gala
Yeah.
that she was in when she walked into the swimming pool. And
Yeah,
like
totally.
that dress, I was like, she is like the most fashionable, what was her name? Judy Jetson or whatever. Like,
Yeah, you're right. She does look exactly like
so
the
I loved
Jetson.
it.
You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she does.
How about you? I don't know.
Oh, I
What's
mean,
your question on you?
so many of them are so much fun, but I think I'm gonna have to go with the classic. I'm gonna have to go with her modified wilderness girl outfit. I am a sucker for a cape. And I love a cape. And it could be stemmed from this movie because her outfit has a cape that she could just like, you know, flash open and that like green, that kind of like silky green underneath. And I just love those pants. I love that and I think that was probably like the first time I'd ever seen like riding pants. Like, is that what they
Uh-huh.
are? They're like
Well,
modeled
yeah,
after like
but they're
riding
like,
pants, I
but they
guess.
have extra hips, but not hips. They're like wide at the thighs.
Yes. Oh, so good. I think
Yeah.
it's just like, I think she looks so good. I'm like, I want to look like that when I'm hiking. I definitely do not, but I would love to. But I just love that outfit. And it's so good.
So the next
But
time you're gonna go hiking, are you gonna wear heeled boots?
oh my gosh, I don't know if I could go that far. And you know what? That brings up a good point. I think you would have to have heeled boots if you were going to round out those very wide pants. Maybe it's that
She
like,
did, yeah.
yeah. I don't know if I think I enjoy comfort too much to be,
Same.
yeah, to be that kind of wilderness girl. But,
Oh, what a great
uh,
movie, you know?
Lisa, this was such a fun little nostalgia trip.
This was.
It's and one thing I would like to say, acknowledge, is that we do have an age difference between the two of us.
We do. It's true.
And I think partly, so I'm younger, I'm like 5 years younger, and I think I know this movie because of my older sister who's your age. And so
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I didn't have growing up was like none of my friends knew this movie.
Um,
So I just want to thank you, Lisa, for allowing me to go down this fun nostalgia trip because it really isn't something I've done it with my sisters,
uh-huh.
but like I don't think a lot of my friends, or maybe they'll listen to this podcast and they'll come out of the woodworks and they'll tell me
There you
that they
go.
do love this movie. But I really appreciate being able to just like really just enjoy, reflect
Yeah.
on this movie.
I am always here to share joy with friends. So anytime you want to talk about joy surrounding Shelley Long and
Love
or
it.
Troop Beverly Hills, I'm here for
Love it. All
you. Cool.
right. Well, until next time, our listeners.
Is it for real?
Is it for real?